Hello, beautiful soul, and welcome back to the Cashmere Couch. Today, we will be continuing the journey that we began in the last episode, which, if you have not yet watched, is linked somewhere over here. We talked about breastfeeding, and the last episode was particularly dedicated to new moms, just sharing some information about the things that you might want to know about before or while you're still new to the whole process, before beginning the process while you're still new. We spoke of the different problems that, or rather, the different questions that a new mom might have, where the milk comes from, the hormones that are responsible for that milk. We spoke of why the baby keeps crying even after a feed. Is it because the milk is not enough? We discussed all that. So if you feel like you are lost in this journey and you want a little bit of support, you want a hug, you want to just listen to a conversation, not advice, then that video would be for you. If any of these videos resonate with you, do drop a comment or, share it with someone that you feel would benefit from it. Now, today we will be talking about a different aspect of breastfeeding, and this is pretty much psychological. I've decided to break the breastfeeding journey that we will be going through together into different parts and putting it up as a series because there's just way too much to talk about. For today, this episode will be dedicated to the mothers out there whose breastfeeding journey did not go as planned. Now, there are some of us who desperately want to feed the baby with our breast milk because we understand the benefits. We totally believe in being able to use what nature, God, the universe, whatever you believe in, has put in our bodies to be able to develop this baby and birth the baby, and then now it is within your own body to be able to feed and nourish the baby. You buy into this philosophy almost, and there is just nothing else you want to do. I know because I used to be that kind of mother until I started seeing the reality of things. So there are some of us who just would not have it any other way. We are just going to follow the way God, nature has intended for us to nourish our babies, and that is with our breasts. But then things don't go as planned, and you feel like a failure sometimes because, okay, now I'm not able to nourish my own baby. There are some of us who come in not knowing what to expect, or maybe you expect something entirely different, and then you realize that this is not for me. It's too uncomfortable, it's too painful, I don't like the smell, I am out, and you risk being judged by others while you are trying to do something that is going to keep you sane to take care of the baby. We have those who want to do it but are physically unable to do it. And so this video is dedicated to you. I'm speaking to you. If you are in any of these categories, then I'm speaking to you because something happened today. I know a person A, okay, and it's a she was talking to me about a conversation that happened with person B. And apparently person B, who is actually family and really close family at that, told person A that, to her face, that she is not a good mother because she was unable to physically, by the way, breastfeed her baby. That hit a nerve pretty strongly, and I just could not understand why this person B would say something like that. But it happened so close to home that I felt like it was a sign for me to reach out to other people who might be going through this. Unless you've had a baby and had this breastfeeding problem yourself, I don't think it is possible for you to understand what even if you are going through the breastfeeding journey, you will not be able to understand every single complication or problem that is associated to not being able to breastfeed, because you probably would only experience one or two or less of those potential problems that you have out there. And if you don't do particular research on one aspect or one problem, you probably would never even hear about it unless someone else talks to you about it. So I'm here to let you know that there are a myriad of reasons why the baby just doesn't drink. Okay, first let's talk about that. You have the latch problem. So not all babies know instinctively, magically, how to latch on to the breast, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that there is anything wrong with them, there is nothing wrong with you. Sometimes the latch problem is caused because of physical attributes. Maybe you have flat or inverted nipples, which means that your nipples are not protruding enough to allow for the baby to latch the way it should. And that's not an abnormality. In fact, it is quite a common problem. You also have tongue tie, which is when you know that skin that is under your tongue, it is too short for your baby to be able to latch on properly. Again, it doesn't mean that the baby is, has a physical disability or something. That's probably just gonna be something that the baby grows out of. That's okay. But at that point in time, that's gonna affect the latch. And sometimes the latch itself is not the issue. You also have problems like oversupply. For some reason, in the first few days, you're just producing way too much milk. And what happens when you have an oversupply, and by the way, this can happen at any point in time in your breastfeeding journey. When you have an oversupply, when the baby starts to suckle, the milk just shoots out because there is so much, right? The milk just shoots out and it kind of chokes the baby. And some babies don't want to drink milk anymore because of this choking sensation. They associate suckling with like having something shoot down their throats, and it's uncomfortable, and therefore they don't want to breastfeed. The other problem that you can face is an undersupply, where your body just doesn't produce enough and the baby just keeps suckling and suckling and suckling and realizes that there is no milk and then just starts crying, this time associating the suckling to still being hungry because there is not enough milk. And I experienced this firsthand. There was a huge dip in my supply because I had to go back to work and I was pumping, but it just seemed that the baby was not satisfied if the milk was not coming directly from my boob. And I think we'll talk about that in a different video where I discuss pump problems and, the idea of going back to work while you're breastfeeding and all that. But right now, see, there are so many issues that you can have that can lead to a person not being able to breastfeed, not because they don't want to, because they just can't. And I have spoken about this friend before in one of my videos. There is this friend that I had, and she was unable to breastfeed her baby skin on skin because there was some latch issue, I think. It was just that the baby did not know how to latch. And this is the reason why you have lactation specialists and lactation nurses around in the first few days in the hospital to sort of teach the baby how to latch properly. And sometimes, no matter what they do, the baby just doesn't get it, or the baby just doesn't want to latch. She was just really determined. She decided to pump, and she was pumping in the hospital already. and she was just pumping like throughout, and she managed to exclusively breastfeed her baby anyway. Again, I don't know where the motivation was coming from. Is it because we're South Asians, and in South Asian cultures, we're always told or pre programmed to think that the breast milk is the best thing you can do for the baby, which is not a wrong thing. But having those expectations placed on you sometimes can be very overwhelming, especially when you've just had a baby and you have a million other things to think about. It's not easy, not for everyone, not if you don't have like the best support system, which some of us honestly are just blessed to have. Um, there is just so much going on in the background, like with background noise that affects us mentally, psychologically, that affects a lot of the things that are happening physically in our lives. I hope that makes sense. And sometimes when you're really anxious or stressed out about the fact that something is wrong with the whole latching thing, or you're having any of those problems that is preventing the breastfeeding from going smoothly, when you have this stress, remember I spoke about oxytocin in the previous episode? Yeah, that's just going to be counterproductive, and your supply is going to go take a dip even further. So, this is just to let you know that you're not alone if you're experiencing any of these issues. I just wanted to stop and hold your hands or give you a hug or just talk to you and make you feel normal, because this is normal. This is what is happening. Yes, there are some of us who seem to have the perfect journey. A lot of people that find out how long I've been breastfeeding for, and the fact that I still breastfeed like my almost 2 year old. I do get people going, "Oh, you're very lucky. You don't have to spend money on milk, yada yada." I've had my set of challenges as well, which is why I'm able to understand when someone wants to do something different with their breastfeeding journey. I've also had a friend who chose to stop breastfeeding 1 month postpartum because she was just not having enough supply, and she was already stressed out between the baby and her house, and she was going through some family issues at the time, wrong timing, but that stress was causing her milk supply to dip even further. The baby was very demanding, and she was kind of going through postpartum blues. So to save her mental health, she chose deliberately not to breastfeed, and she switched to formula. Not everyone finds the transition from feeding directly. Yeah, that's direct feeding. I said skin to skin earlier. Was the same thing to me. So direct feeding versus when you transition from direct feeding to like when you're going off to work and you need to get on with your life. You're not just hanging around 24/7 with baby, and you start to pump, you start to go to work, your normal things fall into place. You're not just 24/7 in this lovey-dovey land thinking about baby all the time. So your milk flow is perfect. You start going to work, you start pumping, there is less direct feeding, or you're just really tired when you come back home. Someone else is feeding the baby. You're worried about the bond, and then that stress reduces your milk supply again, and then it's this just vicious cycle that you're stuck in, this loop. I also had a friend, I have a lot of friends who are moms, and I hear very different stories from all of them. So I also have another friend who deliberately chose to stop breastfeeding about 2 months in, because number one, it was extremely uncomfortable and painful, and she was bleeding around her nipples, the cracked nipple thing. She did use a nipple balm. She used that only. I don't think she tried the coconut oil thing, but it was just way too painful. the next time the baby would latch, it would hurt really badly. I have a niece who went through the same problem. Again, people tell you on social media that if the latch is good, it's not supposed to hurt. Well, guess what? Not every day or every time you have the perfect latch. So that friend of mine, she decided to stop because she was actually having blood in the milk even when she was trying to pump. Same exact thing happened with my niece, and it just physically became too painful for her to continue breastfeeding, and they switched to formula. Let me tell you something. I am a formula fed baby. I turned out pretty fine. There was nothing wrong with me growing up. I have never had to turn around to my mom and go, "This happened because you did not breastfeed me." My mom had a physical problem as well, which made me, or maybe it was me, and she didn't know better, but I would apparently gag whenever I would try, or whenever she would try to feed me. So it was a physical problem. I couldn't actually drink properly from her, and she had to switch to formula. And back then, there wasn't enough exposure awareness about pumping and all those kind of stuff. So I was fed formula milk. There's no problem with like my bone health. 35 years down, there is no issue with like I don't have spondylosis or whatever you're afraid of. Whatever it is that you're afraid of, it's fine. I just wanted to be the one who told you that if no one has already. I also wanted to share a little bit of a personal story. I feel like if I were to tell you this, it might help if you are feeling extremely down. So last year, my father passed away, and he was in and out of the ICU and the wards. Sometimes he was critically ill, and we would get calls from the doctor asking us to call the family members. You know what that means, right? So when that was happening, my second baby was still exclusively breastfeeding. I think she was about 5 months old, and she was still exclusively breastfeeding. And I had the problem of not having enough supply in the fridge. So, yes, I was pumping, but I wasn't pumping enough for this because I wasn't expecting it. It happened pretty unexpectedly. And I was kind of working from home, so I was direct feeding anyway. And when this happened, all of a sudden, there was not enough time to like pump and get the milk flow or the supply going to a point which would have been comfortable for me to run around. And when I would be at the hospital, I would be there for hours on end. So when I would come back home, I would be full enough to just feed the baby, and then I wouldn't have enough to really pump and store. So that became a bit of an issue, to a point where I just told my family that I was going to do the one thing that I told myself I would never do. Again, because of expectations from society, because of all the free advice that people give you, breast milk is the best. And I just did not believe in formula milk, but I had to, because, my family was just my dad, my mom, and myself. Growing up, I didn't have any other siblings. It was just the three of us. And of course, I'm going to be there for them. And my in-laws, they were beautiful. They assisted with taking care of the baby. I had a great helper back then as well. But there was that one thing that no one else could give the baby except me, and that was the milk. And I was so tired, and I told myself, we're just going to give formula. At least it was supplementary. That was what I was telling to console myself. At least it was supplementary. It was not the primary milk that she was getting, because I would still come back home and latch at the end of the day. And so I was actually relieved when my helper told me that she would not take the formula milk. there was some of my milk still left in the freezer, she would take that. But when she tried to feed the formula, she just knew that there was a difference and she didn't want to take it. And I actually felt relieved that my breastfeeding journey would probably still go as planned. But you know what? The stress levels skyrocketed because I just really wasn't able to feed her enough. I had to leave my mother alone in the hospital to come back home just so that I could feed and make the baby sleep. And it also happened on the night or the day that my father actually passed. So it was completely unexpected. He had come out from the ICU, and we were actually preparing to get him discharged to come back home. And then suddenly, he was having some breathing difficulties, which he already had, and the doctors had told me, there was some lung infection, whatever. And so it had happened before, and he pulled through. So I wasn't expecting him to go this time around when he had the same problem. Um, and then so we rushed down at night, when the baby has to drink and sleep. So we rushed down, and I honestly was not expecting my dad to go. But it was kind of obvious that he was leaving us. But I thought that I would have time again to see him the next morning. I really thought I would see him again the next morning when I kissed him goodbye and left. I thought maybe like his soul would have probably like, spiritually he was gone, but I would still get to see him physically breathing, like the body is still, I don't know. I thought he would still be around the next morning when I kissed him goodbye. And the last person who was left with him was my mom. And so I left him with mom. I came back home and I was feeding the baby, and I fell asleep along with the baby because it had been a horribly long day. And then I had my alarm set to wake up really early in the morning so that we could go. Before the alarm rang, like a few hours after I had fallen asleep, my mom was calling me saying that my dad had passed. And so I didn't have a lot of time to process the fact that I had to come back home to feed my baby. But, there have been many times after that that I have thought about this. It's not guilt, it's not blame. How can I blame my baby's hunger or my baby's need for my milk um, on the fact that I wasn't there in the very last moments? But I don't know how to feel about this. It's definitely not blame, nothing to do with my baby, but it's more of something that happened within me. Like, was I trying to be a good mother? Would my father, knowing my dad, he would probably have said the same thing, like, go feed the baby, go and rest, I'll be fine. Um, but yeah, you see where I'm coming from. Sometimes breastfeeding, it's not as easy as it seems from the outside. So if this story helped you through something that you have been thinking about, all the stories that I've shared, in an attempt to make you feel less alone in this journey, if you feel like your journey is not going according to plan, then I think I'm happy if I made you feel any less alone. Yeah. There are a few celebrity stories as well. I went to do my research on that because I feel like the portrayal that you get on mass media, not just social media, on pregnancies and babies, these women, they have such hot bodies, they have bounced back, they don't have stretch marks, they are so sexy, and they've had children. So, how is that possible? They can do it, you know. They also have their fair share of problems, and I think one story that I can remember offhand that I can share with you here. If you know who Pink is, um, she was a pretty big sensation in the pop world at one point in time. And she actually spoke of mastitis and the challenges of breastfeeding when she was on tour. So when celebrities get back to work, they have a lot more expectations placed on them by people like us. And when they try to meet those expectations, they also fail because they are trying to be normal mothers. And one of the things that happened to Pink was mastitis because you're on tour. You can't like be feeding your baby all the time. Um, yeah, if you don't know what mastitis is, it's when you have engorgement, you haven't fed your baby in a while, and your milk ducts and your boobs basically just become swollen and super painful, and like there's a whole rock in there. When you have mastitis, it has gone beyond just engorgement, and you have fever and like a whole bunch of other stuff. And the best part about falling sick when you're breastfeeding is that there are a million things in terms of drugs and medication that you can't take. Until then, I will see you again. There is just one other thing that I wanted to mention. I've been writing little notes for you on my Instagram page. Um, and I am thinking of releasing a set of notes that you might be able to purchase and give as a gift to anyone or even yourself. More information on that coming soon. You can check out Instagram to find out more. Yeah. Otherwise, we are done for the night. I'll see you again real soon. This is the Cashmere Couch. Good night.